Imagine watching your marriage collapse in real time under chandeliers and camera flashes while your unborn baby kicks inside you as if sensing the danger. Claire's husband does not whisper his betrayal in private. He turns it into a spectacle, announcing that his wife, his future, and even their child were nothing more than assets in a larger plan. This is a story where love becomes strategy, and public ruin is only the first layer of the nightmare.
It was the Innovators Summit, 7 months into her pregnancy, when her husband's life went viral. He wasn't on stage. He was on every screen in the room, the subject of a breaking news blast. His affair, with a startup founder he was funding, was now public knowledge. And she was pregnant too. Marcus Thorne never counted on his wife, Clara, to recover from the public disgrace. He never dreamed a rival venture capitalist would help her rebuild. And he never foresaw the boardroom war she would wage, the day she'd lose it all again, and the fury that would make her the only one who could burn his empire down. This is Clara Davenport's story, a woman who endured public ruin not once, but 3 times, and learned to command the fire. Stay tuned, you won't predict how this ends. A headline flashed across the main screen, bright enough to eclipse the stage. Clara felt the air leave the room. Her hand went to the swell of her belly, where the baby suddenly kicked, a sharp, frantic pulse, mirroring the chaos erupting around her. "What is that?" Clara whispered, convinced her eyes were deceiving her. The collective gasp of 500 tech elites was a cold wind on her skin. Something was terribly wrong. She'd felt it for months in the distance that grew between them, the endless strategy sessions that ran all night, the way Marcus's gaze was always locked on his phone, never on her. A reporter shoved a glowing screen in his face. "Marcus, a comment for TechCrunch?" he shouted. His eyes swept the frantic crowd and found her. For a moment, just one, the world stopped. He commanded the room's attention, a titan of industry caught in the spotlight's glare. San Francisco's new money held its breath. That sea of ambition and greed. The orchestra played on, a cheerful, oblivious soundtrack to her life's collapse. Clara saw her husband's face, the one she'd loved for 6 years, twist into the cruel smirk of a stranger. "Is this some kind of stunt?" she asked her brother, her voice barely audible. "Did you know?" Marcus cleared his throat, the sound booming from the speakers like a death knell. The ballroom's energy turned icy, a frost spreading from the glowing screens. "Sloan and I are building a new future," Marcus announced. Clara let out a choked laugh, a raw, sharp sound. "A sick joke, Marcus. Very funny. Now what's the real story? There is no other story." His tone was flat, clinical, like he was announcing quarterly earnings. "Our partnership is dissolved, Clara." His phone had been vibrating nonstop. She saw him exchange a quick, triumphant look with someone across the room. A shared victory she was not a part of. "Marcus, we're at the summit," Clara pleaded, her hand shielding her unborn child. "My family is here. Our friends are here. I am 7 months pregnant. This isn't happening." "It is." Marcus finally locked eyes with her. His gaze, once her anchor, was now terrifyingly empty. "Sloan is pregnant as well. She's carrying my son, and I've made my decision." The words hung in the air, an executioner's sentence. Clara heard them, but her mind refused to believe them. Sloan. The name was legend in the valley. Sloan Richter. A brilliant, ruthless founder who had charmed every investor in sight. 28 years old, with a sharp mind and a smile that secured billion-dollar valuations. The woman who was always at the same conferences, standing just a little too close to Clara's husband. "What are you saying?" Clara's voice was lost in the growing clamor. "Sloan?" Marcus said her name like a prayer. "We've been partners for 2 years. She understands my vision. She challenges me. And now she is giving me the heir I want. 2 years," the number echoed in Clara's head. 2 years of lies. 2 years of sharing a life with a man who is building another one in secret. "But I'm carrying your child," Clara's voice broke. "Our baby. The one we wanted so badly. All those treatments. All that heartbreak." "That pregnancy was about merging our family's assets," Marcus said, loud enough for the reporters to hear. "A legacy arrangement that I assumed had been properly managed. Obviously, there was a failure in the protocol." "Properly managed," The clinical phrase hit Clara like a physical blow. What did he mean? She looked at her husband and saw him clearly for the first time. How had she never seen the predator behind the visionary genius? The truth was, Marcus Thorne was raised to disrupt. The golden child of Silicon Valley, he learned that sentiment was a bug, not a feature. Emotions were friction. People were nodes in a network, to be leveraged for growth or disconnected. His mother, a formidable CEO, groomed him for influence, while his father praised only market domination. By 20, Marcus knew that love was a transaction and marriage was a strategic alliance. The most efficient path to power was to mirror connection, extract value, and then pivot without sentiment. Clara had been his most valuable merger. Her old money name and connections gave his aggressive fund an air of legitimacy. She was the perfect front for a man who felt nothing but ambition. For a brief time in the beginning, he'd almost let himself feel something real. He'd crushed the impulse. It was inefficient. It was a risk. So he optimized the lie and built his world on the cold logic that everyone, including his wife and unborn child, was ultimately expendable. I don't get it. Hot tears streamed down her cold face. Marcus, please. Whatever this is, let's just go. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. Marcus gestured for Sloane, who moved toward him through the stunned crowd. The gesture was a final, public verdict. Our marriage was a Series A investment. Your family's name got me the access I needed for the IPO. You served your purpose. Her hands shook as she watched his new life take its place by his side. Her fingers felt numb. Marcus, no! Clara was openly sobbing now, her private horror a public spectacle for a dozen live-streaming phones. You'll destroy me. Our baby. That is no longer my problem. He took Sloane's hand. The door to their shared life had just been slammed, locked, and bolted. Camera flashes went off, a sudden blinding storm, burning the scene into her memory. Disrupt or be disrupted, he whispered as security guided her away. Frankly, I am indifferent to your outcome. Clara stumbled backward, her legs giving way. Pain shot through her, a raw agony that was more than just a broken heart. The stares of the crowd felt like a physical assault. Her brother pulled her to her feet, guiding her through the glass doors of the convention center. Wait, my phone. My clutch, she cried. Marcus, please. I have nothing. Through the glass, she saw him on the giant screens, posing with Sloane, his hand on her stomach. He was smiling, looking like a man who had just closed the deal of a lifetime, not a man who had just publicly executed his pregnant wife. His black Tesla silently pulled up to the curb. The electric motor hummed as Marcus sped into the fog-laced night. The taillights were two glowing red dots of pure indifference. Then they were gone. Clara stood on the pavement, the cold San Francisco wind whipping at her gown, leaving her shivering and alone. This can't be real. The thought was a desperate prayer, a mantra to undo the past 10 minutes. He would never do this. It was a nightmare. In a second, the red glow of his car would reappear. He would come back. But the street was empty. There was only the wind and the sound of her own ragged breathing. He was gone. The truth hit her with the force of a car crash, and she sank to the cold, hard ground. She stumbled through the blinding snow, the silk of her ruined gown catching on unseen branches. Her thoughts were a storm of their own, replaying the cold smile on Marcus's face as he admitted it. The blueprints on his laptop weren't just a project. They were a future he was building with Isabel. Her hands cradled her stomach, a desperate shield for their son. The cold was a physical blow, stealing her breath. She had to keep moving for the little life that knew nothing of betrayal. Just a few more steps. She had to survive this. Her only purpose now was to protect him. The wind howled, erasing her path, swallowing her into the white emptiness. The ridiculous satin pumps, perfect for the party, were now frozen weights on her feet. Numbness crept up her legs. The cashmere wrap, a gift from him, offered no defense against the gale. It was all for show, just like their marriage. Then, a flicker through the trees, a soft amber glow, a beacon in the blizzard, a home, hope, fierce and desperate, propelled her forward. Her muscles screamed, her lungs burned with every frigid breath. The light grew stronger, revealing a sprawling log cabin, smoke curling from a stone chimney. It was the opposite of her own glass and steel house. It looked warm, real. She fought toward the long tree-lined driveway, a final, agonizing push. She could feel the end coming. A strange, peaceful warmth seeped into her bones, the body's final cruel trick. The urge to just lie down, to rest in the snow, was overwhelming. Just a little farther. She reached the porch steps, her legs giving out. She crawled the last few feet. The heavy oak door had a simple iron handle. Her fingers were stiff, useless. Clara collapsed against the wood. The rough grain, a final sensation on her cheek. So this is how it ends. She had tried to escape. She had fought for her son. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered. Mommy tried so hard. As her consciousness faded, the last thing she heard was the click of a bolt and a man's sharp, concerned voice cutting through the storm. "My God, what happened to you? Maria, call 911 now." Powerful arms lifted her as if she weighed nothing. She felt a surge of heat from his body, a solid presence in the chaos. A man's heart beat steadily against her ear before everything went dark. Warmth, a deep, penetrating heat from a crackling fire and thick wool blankets. That was her first sensation. She tried to open her eyelids. They felt frozen shut. A pair of large, gentle hands were rubbing her own, bringing life back to them. "Just breathe. You're inside now. You're safe." The voice was a deep, soothing rumble, utterly calm. It wasn't Marx's clipped, impatient tone. This voice felt like a shelter. Clara forced her eyes, open to a blurry scene of wood beams and firelight. "You're okay?" His face swam into view. He looked to be in his early 40s, with kind, serious eyes and a dusting of snow still in his dark hair. He had a strong jaw and a look of quiet competence. "Where?" Her voice was a dry croak. "You're at my home," he said, tucking a heavy quilt around the howlers. "I'm Ben Carter. You collapsed on my front porch a little while ago." He added, "My housekeeper is bringing some broth, and we're trying to get a doctor here." Clara tried to push herself up, the room tilting violently. A wave of nausea hit her, and she fell back against the plush sofa. "Easy does it. You were dangerously hypothermic. A few more minutes out there." He didn't finish, but his concerned gaze said enough. A stranger cared more for her than her own husband did. Is my baby okay?" Her belly felt hard and cold beneath the blankets. A new terror seized her. "I can't feel him kick." "Here," Ben said, producing a stethoscope from a medical bag on the floor. "Listen for yourself. My housekeeper, Maria, was a labor and delivery nurse. She found a strong heartbeat, but I know you need to hear it." He helped guide the cold metal disc to the right spot, his touch impersonal and professional. With trembling hands, Clara put the earpieces in. A fast, steady rhythm filled her ears. Thump, 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 strong and alive. "He's there," she sobbed, tears of relief freezing on her cheeks. "He's okay." "He's a little fighter," Ben said, his voice soft, just like his mother. An older woman with a kind, weathered face entered with a steaming bowl on a tray. "The soup is hot, Dr. Ben," she said gently. "I have a room ready." Ben was tall, with the solid build of someone who worked outdoors. As Maria helped Clara sit up, propping pillows behind her, the room sharpened. It was a great room, dominated by a massive stone fireplace. The furniture was worn leather and warm wood, with shelves packed with books, not for show, but for reading. It was a home, not a showroom. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke. "Drink this," Maria urged, placing the warm bowl in Clara's hands. "It will warm you from the inside." Clara breathed in the savory steam and took a slow sip. The hot liquid felt like life itself spreading through her. "Thank you," she managed to say. Her voice was stronger now. Thank you both. I don't know what I would have done. You wouldn't have made it, Ben stated, his tone direct but not unkind. You were in the early stages of shock. Another 20 minutes, and it would have been too late. The stark reality of his words made her shiver. We called for an ambulance, Maria added, sitting on a nearby stool. But the roads are impassable. The storm has the whole valley shut down. I need to call someone, Clara said, panic rising again. My phone. I left everything. The landline is working, Ben said, pointing to a simple phone on a side table. Cell towers are down, but that line is secure. Call who you need to. Clara stared at the phone. Her parents were gone. Her friends had been pushed away by Marcus. There was no one left to call. Her circle shrank as Leo's possessiveness grew, leaving only Claire, a bold gallery owner who refused to be pushed away. Start from the beginning. Aiden's tone was steady, insistent. How did you wash up on my private beach? During a nor'easter, 7 months pregnant, and dressed for a charity gala? Chloe looked down at her ruined gown. The couture jacket was useless against the sea, her heels lost to the waves. A testament to vanity. My husband? The word was ash in her mouth. We were sailing to our place in Nantucket for a fundraiser. She steeled herself. He cut the engine in the middle of the storm. Her voice shook. He told me to get in the dinghy. Said his business partner was expecting, and that he had made his choice. The silence in the room was absolute. The fire crackled. The wind screamed against the glass. He left you at sea. Aiden's voice was a low, dangerous thing. Colder than the ocean. Your husband abandoned you in a storm. 7 months pregnant. Yes, Chloe whispered, staring at her hands. The humiliation was a physical blow, though she knew Leo was the monster here. Humiliation, she realized, was rarely rational. That's premeditated. Aiden's words were like chips of ice. The voice of an artist who sees the ugly truth in things. At best, it's criminal negligence, resulting in... Well, you were close. I know. The tears she had choked back finally came. A hot, silent stream. I know what he did. It doesn't feel real. Their entire marriage. A fiction that ended in the churning Atlantic. Elena was there instantly. Her arms, a warm anchor. Smelling of lavender. And old books. Oh, you poor child. Elena's voice was raw with fury. What kind of demon does that? What kind of animal leaves his pregnant wife to the ocean on a night like this? Chloe sobbed against the housekeeper's shoulder. Deep, wrenching sounds for the man she'd loved and the life he had just destroyed. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry. You don't know me. I'm a mess in your home. You have nothing to apologize for. Aiden stood by a vast window showing the angry sea, his hand near a small candid photo of a woman with laughing eyes. What that man did is an abomination, he said, his gaze on the picture. You're not a mess. You're a survivor. There's a profound difference. Chloe looked up at this stranger who offered her dignity instead of pity. Why are you being so kind to me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Aiden was quiet for a long moment, his eyes shifting from the photo to the storm outside. Because my wife would have insisted, his voice was soft. Clara collected strays, people who needed a defender. She would have pulled you from the water herself. She would have brought down hellfire on your behalf. Would have. The past tense was a ghost in the room. Chloe finally grasped the source of the home's deep sadness. I'm so sorry for your loss, she said. Aiden just nodded once, a sharp, final gesture. Elena, please prepare the East guest suite. Our guest is staying until the storm passes. He checked his tablet. The storm surge has flooded the causeway. It'll be impassable for at least 2 days. 2 days! I can't possibly impose, Chloe started. There must be a town. The causeway is underwater. Aiden's tone left no room for debate. Even if we could get you out, which is a terrible idea, there is nowhere to go. Please, stay, rest. Let Elena care for you, and let our doctor check on you and the baby. She had no strength left to argue. Her body was a roadmap of pain. Her heart was shattered, and her baby needed sanctuary. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how I could ever repay you. You can repay me by painting a new life for yourself. Aiden's intense eyes met hers. That's it. Live for you, and for your child. Make his betrayal irrelevant. He turned and left, his footsteps silent on the polished concrete floors. Don't you mind, Mr. Sterling? Elena said gently, helping Chloe to her feet. He's not harsh, just hollowed. Ever since we lost Mrs. Clara. It was a sailing accident 2 years ago. 1 minute she was here, she said, her expression clouded with old pain. He hasn't been the same since. As they ascended a floating steel staircase, Chloe saw the walls were filled not with family photos, but with stunning, large-scale, abstract paintings. How long have you been with them? Chloe asked. Since before they were them. Elena gave a sad smile. I was Claire's assistant at the gallery. I just stayed. This house became my home. She paused at a door of reclaimed ocean blue wood. This estate used to be so alive, Elena said, her voice filled with a quiet grief. Parties all summer, collectors and critics always visiting. Claire's laughter would echo off the walls. Now, it's just a beautiful museum. Mr. Sterling paints. He takes calls with his agent in New York. He walks the cliffs. He eats, but the flavor is gone from his world. She opened the door, revealing a room of minimalist calm. The walls were a soft gray, dominated by a single massive painting of a serene sea. A large platform bed was piled with cashmere blankets. A floor-to-ceiling window offered a terrifyingly beautiful view of the raging storm. The bathroom is through there, Elena gestured. I'll bring you some of Mrs. Clara's sleepwear. You two are about the same size. Or were, before your little one. I'll find something comfortable. Her smile was a balm, a mother's smile, radiating a gentle strength Chloe hadn't felt in years. Get some rest. Dr. Sharma is on her way. Things always look different in the morning. That's what Clara always used to say. No matter how dark the night, the dawn still comes. Elena left, the door closing with a quiet click. Chloe stood in the beautiful room, a castaway in a stranger's life, feeling a kindness she hadn't earned, trapped on a private peninsula by a hurricane, set adrift by her husband, 32 weeks pregnant with a child he had tried to discard. She went to the window, pressing her hand against the cool, vibrating glass. Outside, the rain and sea spray merged into a violent gray blur. She had to say it aloud to give the treachery a name, to make it real. I'm not crazy. The words fogged the pain. He actually did it. Leo really put me in that boat and sailed away. He looked right at me and just left. He felt absolutely nothing. Her son kicked, a sharp, insistent jab from inside. Chloe wrapped her arms around her belly, her breath catching. Okay, little man, it's just us now. Your father is gone. The future he sold me is a lie. But we are here. We are safe. And we are going to figure this out. I don't know how, but I promise you, we will. The baby kicked again, a stronger, more determined thump, as if to agree. Chloe managed a weak smile, the first in what felt like a lifetime. Perhaps they really could survive this. The knock on her door came at 7:05 a.m. Exactly. Chloe knew because she'd been watching the digital clock on the bedside table for hours. Sleep had been impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Leo's face, a mask of chilling calm. So, she watched the numbers change. 1 a.m., then 2, then 3. The world outside a swirling vortex of wind and water. Come in, she called, her voice rough. The door opened to reveal a woman in her early 50s, her dark hair in a tight, efficient knot that broadcast competence. Her face was weathered and kind, with a firm jaw and intelligent, assessing eyes. She carried a well-used medical bag that had seen its share of emergencies. I'm Dr. Anya Sharma. She set the bag down with a decisive thud. I just drove a UTV through what used to be the main access road. So, I hope you're going to make this trip worthwhile. Despite everything, Chloe felt the ghost of a smile. I am? More than you can imagine. Good. Dr. Sharma pulled out a stethoscope, its finish worn by time. Now, let's check on this little stowaway. Elena mentioned you had a rough crossing. That's one way of saying it. The examination was thorough. She took her blood pressure 3 times. Her pulse was counted for a full minute, not the rush checks she got in the city. Her temperature was thankfully stable, and the baby's heartbeat was methodically sought until Dr. Sharma found it, holding the device steady for a long, reassuring moment. How far along are you? 32 weeks and 3 days. And you were exposed to the elements for about how long? 45 minutes, maybe an hour. I wasn't exactly timing it. Doctor. Ben pulled a stool closer. He took her wrist, his fingers, finding her pulse. His focus was so complete it made a new fear crawl up her spine. What is it? Clara's voice trembled. Is the baby all right? The heartbeat is a bit fast, Ben said, his expression serious. It's not in the danger zone yet, but with the shock that your body has been through, we have to be concerned about stress. What kind of stress? Premature labor is the biggest risk, he said, meeting her eyes directly. A trauma like this can trigger contractions. I need to be blunt with you. There's a real possibility you could go into labor in the next day or two. If there are any complications, you would need a hospital, and right now, we can't get you to one. A high-risk pregnancy requires a fully equipped facility, a specialist, and an on-call surgical team, not a wine country estate. Dr. Evans sighed softly. I can manage a normal birth anywhere. I've done it in helicopters and on yachts, but this is different. Clara gazed at the hand-painted vines on the ceiling of the guest suite, where she felt her world collapsing. The access road, she whispered. Is it clear? The wildfire nearby has the main highway closed for at least another day. After that, emergency vehicles get priority, which could mean another 12 hours before we could get you out. Dr. Evans' voice softened. We're looking at 48 hours, optimistically, to get you to a proper medical center. And if I go into labor, I will do everything in my power to ensure a safe delivery for your child. I have medication to potentially delay contractions. I have a kit for complications, and I have my experience. She patted Clara's hand gently. I'm telling you this so you understand the stakes. The best thing now is absolute calm, complete rest. Let your body stabilize. What if the baby needs more? We'll face that challenge if it comes. I've managed complex births in far worse conditions. It's not what we want, but it's not hopeless. Dr. Evans stood, her movements efficient as she repacked her medical bag. For now, you stay in this bed. Drink plenty of water, eat what the staff brings you, even if you're not hungry. And call me if you feel the slightest twinge. Any change in the baby's activity? Anything at all? Understood? Yes. I understand. At the door, Dr. Evans paused. Your husband, Liam, explained the situation. How you came to be so distressed. Her voice hardened. I've been the private physician for the families in this valley for 2 decades. I've seen greed, affairs, and bitter inheritance battles. But what your husband is doing, she trailed off, shaking her head, that is a truly calculated kind of cruelty. He wanted me isolated. Clara's voice was hollow, distant. Admitting it felt surreal. He almost got his wish. Dr. Evans' eyes met hers. I've seen people at the breaking point. I know what it looks like. You were right there, Clara. Another hour of that stress, and we would be having a tragic conversation. But I'm still here. You are still here, and your little one is a fighter, just like you. No matter what comes next, you've already shown your strength. Dr. Evans offered a small, firm smile. Whatever that man made you feel, whatever lies he told you about being fragile, he was wrong. You endured betrayal. It would break most people. That's not weakness. That's resilience. The door clicked shut. Clara lay still in the cavernous bed, trying to regulate her breathing. In, out. Slowing her racing heart, willing the tension from her body. Her baby was at risk. There was no hospital, just doctor with a leather bag in a remote villa. And outside, the smoke from the fires still hung in the air. If something went wrong, she could lose everything. Her baby could be lost, here in this opulent room with a view of the sun-scorched vineyards. Meanwhile, Liam was back in the city with his partner, Anya, toasting their success, probably without a thought for her. Just then, her iPad, left on the nightstand, chimed with a shared calendar notification, shattering the suffocating silence. Clara was in her suite with the housekeeper, trying to force down a few bites of soup. Her stomach was a knot of anxiety, refusing food. But the older woman was insistent. You must eat, ma'am. The baby needs your strength, and if you have none, what then? The notification was an urgent summons from a law firm she'd never heard of. Before she could process it, the room's private line buzzed. The housekeeper answered. Clara saw the woman's expression change from polite deference to alarm, then to a quiet, protective anger. "One moment, please," she said, her voice strained. "I will see if she is available." She offered the phone to Clara, her gaze telegraphing that trouble was calling. "It's a man named David. He says he's your brother, and he's been trying to reach you all day." He sounds beside himself. "David." Clara grabbed the phone like a lifeline. "Hello?" "Clara, my God, I thought something had happened." David's voice was a torrent of panicked relief that crackled over the line. "I've been calling for hours. I called Liam's office. I even called the estate manager. They all said you were on a wellness retreat and couldn't be disturbed. Where are you? What is happening? Where is Liam? I'm fine." Clara's voice trembled, undermining her words. "I'm safe. I'm at the vineyard. Liam dropped me here for a rest." "A rest? Clara, what are you talking about? He's been posting on social media photos of the two of you in Italy last spring, captioning them about your amazing baby moon. He told my assistant you were suffering from prenatal depression and had to be institutionalized. Is that true?" He's lying. The words were stark, devoid of emotion. "He drove me here, yesterday. He told me Anya, his new VP, was also pregnant and that he had to secure his legacy." A dense, heavy silence filled the line. Clara could hear David's steady, sharp breaths. Then, the calm shattered. "I'm going to ruin him." David's voice was pure ice. "I'm going to find that manipulative, soulless sociopath, and I'm going to methodically tear down every pillar of his empire. Then I will sue him into oblivion. Where is he? Is he with her? With Anya, the VP, who is also having his child? I know." David's tone became frigid, precise, which was far more chilling than his anger. "I know all about Anya, and I know much more. I started digging when his assistant gave me the runaround. Called in a few favors, looked into some financials he never wanted me to see. What did you find? You might want to sit down, Clara. Just tell me." David took a sharp breath. When he spoke again, his tone was like a prosecutor reading a verdict. "Liam emptied the joint brokerage account this morning. Every penny, almost $3 million, was transferred to an offshore holding company." Clara clutched the nightstand as the room began to sway, that familiar, terrifying sensation of the world falling away. "The apartment," David continued, his voice relentless. "The penthouse you spent 2 years renovating. Your name was never on the title. He had you sign the purchase agreement as a witness for his corporation, not as a co-owner. It's a common tactic to defraud a partner. The victim thinks they're a buyer, but they're just witnessing the sale, signing away any claim. That's impossible. I signed the deed. You signed the witness attestation. It's on the same signature page. It's designed to deceive someone who trusts the person they're with." David's voice finally broke with a trace of sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Clara, but it's even worse." "How can it be worse? He sold the penthouse last week, before he even drove you to the vineyard. The entire deal was done through a shell company. He planned to liquidate your life in a single weekend." Clara was speechless, unable to breathe. The sprawling, beautiful suite suddenly felt like a tomb. "There's something else." David hesitated, his voice now thick with a compound of rage and grief. "Anya wasn't a recent affair. They've been together for over 5 years, since before he met you. I found offshore accounts, property deeds in her name, travel records. They were building a life together while he was using you. 5 years." The number echoed in Clara's mind. 5 years of a shared bed. 5 years of building what she thought was a future. 5 years with a man who was systematically plotting her destruction. But the last part, David's voice cracked. "Oh, Clara, this is the most vile part. Remember when your family's arts charity was about to fold last winter? And that anonymous grant saved it? That was Liam's foundation. It was a lie to get you to sign over your inheritance into a joint trust. He told my office this morning that he was pulling the funding, citing gross financial misconduct. He's trying to destroy our father's legacy to cover his tracks." The phone fell from Clara's hand, clattering onto the marble floor. Sophia's voice was a distant buzz from the phone on the hardwood floor. Olivia. Olivia. Can you hear me? Say something. But she was paralyzed. Dr. Sharma was by her side instantly, her capable arms easing Olivia into a nearby armchair. A glass of water was pressed into her shaking hand. Breathe, dear, the doctor urged. Whatever you saw, you must breathe for your child. Think of the baby. Olivia's lungs obeyed, pulling in ragged breaths that felt like fire. Each exhale was a surrender. Liam hadn't just left her. He had architected her ruin from the beginning. Her career, her finances, her home. It was all a gilded cage he'd built to keep her docile, a temporary player in his grand production. She had believed every word, cherished every hollow gesture, and loved a man who viewed her as a problem to be solved. Dr. Sharma picked up the phone, spoke in clipped, professional tones to Sophia, and jotted down a number, promising an update soon. She sat in the silent kitchen, taking Olivia's hand while the blizzard outside howled, and in the quiet devastation, something vital inside Olivia finally shattered. The contractions began near dusk. Olivia tried to ignore them, just stress, false pains, the baby settling. She'd had similar flutters for weeks, ghosts of pressure that faded. But these did not fade. They sharpened, tightened, and pulled her under. Ethan, the doctor's husband, had his wife on the phone, seconds after Olivia cried out. How close? Less than 5 minutes. Olivia gripped the chair, her body seized by a wave of agony. This can't be happening now. She isn't ready. It's too soon. Your body has suffered a profound shock. Trauma can signal that it's time. Ready or not. Dr. Sharma listened to the baby's heart with her antique stethoscope, a little rapid, but strong. We need to monitor this and see if we can slow it down. Can you make it stop? We can try, she said softly. We will try everything. They moved Olivia to the main bedroom, giving them space. Dr. Sharma had already transformed it, laying out sterile linens and instruments. Their son Ben carried supplies, his face tense, but his movements steady. He moved with the quiet focus of a man accustomed to emergencies. What else? He asked his wife. Just be ready. We may need you. Sophia was still on the highway, hours out but getting closer, bringing a folder of documents that could destroy a man. And Olivia was in the center of the storm, 33 weeks along, terrified in a house of strangers, on a day that should have been ordinary. If I don't survive this, she said, her voice thin with pain, you have to promise me something. Make sure Sophia shows everyone who Liam really is. I won't let him get away with it. You will survive. Ethan's voice was absolute. You've come too far to give up. But if I don't, promise me. He took her hand. Isabel didn't bring you to my doorstep just to let you die here. That wasn't her way. Olivia almost smiled, but another contraction stole her breath. Just promise, she gasped. Promise my daughter will know her mother wasn't a fool, that she fought back. I swear it. Ethan's eyes were wet. But you'll be the one to tell her. You're not going anywhere. The next hours blurred into a storm of pain and will. The contractions were erratic. Sometimes they would cease for an hour, granting Olivia's exhausted body a brief reprieve. Then they would return every 5 minutes, sharp and unforgiving. Dr. Sharma watched over her with the tools she had, a blood pressure cuff, a stethoscope, and kits she'd sterilized herself. The labor has stalled, she said late that night. It's a good sign. Your body is trying to protect the baby. Let it fight. How long will it last? There's no way to know. Hours, perhaps a day. Every single hour we gain is a victory for your daughter. Dr. Sharma checked the tiny heartbeat. This one is a warrior, she murmured, just like her mother. Ethan had not left the room. He sat near the window, a silent guardian, close enough to help, but distant enough to grant her space. He hadn't slept. He simply watched, waiting. You don't need to stay, Olivia said during a pause. This could drag on. I'm not leaving, he replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. When Isabel was dying, I never left her side for 72 hours. I watched every breath she took. I held her hand when she took her last. That must have been hell. It was, he said, and it was the most important thing I have ever done. His eyes found hers in the low light. Nobody should have to face this kind of battle alone. Whatever happens tonight, you will not be alone. Hot tears tracked down Olivia's temples. She had been left so many times, by her parents, taken too young, by Liam, whose love was a performance, by the friends she'd let drift away to appease a husband who wanted her isolated. Now this stranger, a man shattered by his own grief, was vowing to stay. "Thank you," she whispered. "Save your thanks for when it's over." A faint smile touched his lips. "Thank me when your daughter is sleeping safely, Liam Vanderbilt is facing justice, and your life is yours again. Is that even possible?" Yes. His certainty was a force of nature. "I've seen what you've already survived. I think you can do anything." At 6 in the morning, the real labor began. The baby was coming, ready or not. Dr. Sharma worked with practiced calm, giving orders to Sophia, who had finally arrived and was now her deputized nurse. Reposition, ice chips, breathe, a small dose of pain relief that barely touched the edges. "The baby is in position," Dr. Sharma said after an examination. "Head down. We're doing this now." "It's too soon." Olivia's voice cracked with fear. "I'm only 32 weeks. 32 weeks is early, but it is not a tragedy. Babies born now do wonderfully, with proper care." The doctor looked her directly in the eye. "I have delivered my share of premature infants. Most are complaining about their taxes today. Your daughter will be one of them." Another contraction crashed over her. Olivia cried out, her fingers digging into Ethan's hand. "Breathe," he commanded. "Look at me. We'll count. 1, 2, 3. His voice was an anchor in a sea of pain. She locked onto his dark eyes, the rhythm of his counting. "Good," Dr. Sharma said as the wave receded. "You're progressing quickly. This little one is eager to join us." The next hour was a primal blur. Push, rest, breathe. Push again. Olivia was no longer thinking, only doing. Her entire world narrowed to a single, urgent task. And then, the cord. It's wrapped around her neck. The words sliced through the fog. Olivia saw a flash of fear in the doctor's eyes before she concealed it. Dr. Sharma's calm did not waver. "What does that mean?" "It means you need to stay very still and let me work." Her hands moved with blinding speed, a series of internal maneuvers Olivia could only feel as intense, terrifying pressure. The fear was a physical weight, crushing her lungs. "One more push," the doctor ordered. "Everything you have left, now!" Olivia screamed and bore down with the last of her strength. A terrifying silence filled the room, an empty space where a baby's cry should be. Then, a sudden furious wail pierced the air. The most beautiful sound Olivia had ever known. "It's a girl." Dr. Sharma's voice was thick with emotion. "A perfect, healthy, very loud little girl." They laid the baby on Olivia's chest, impossibly tiny and still slick from birth. Olivia stared at her daughter, at the shock of dark hair, the tightly shut eyes, the fists beating the air. "Hello," Olivia whispered, her voice breaking. "Hello, Clara Isabel. I'm your mother. I will never let anyone harm you." The baby's eyes fluttered open, a deep, newborn blue, already burning with a survivor's fire. "She's magnificent," Ethan's voice was raw. "Just magnificent. Clara Isabel Vanderbilt," Olivia announced to the room. "Clara, for the clarity this has brought me, and Isabel for the woman whose home gave us shelter." Ethan let out a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob. He reached out a trembling hand to stroke the infant's cheek. "Isabel would have loved that," he said. Dr. Sharma gave them their moment before returning to her work. 5 pounds, 2 ounces, she declared. "Small, but a fighter. Lungs are perfect, heart is strong. After all this, she's a true miracle." "A Christmas miracle," Sophia said from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "A day late, but she made it." 2 days after Clara was born, the blizzard broke and the roads were cleared. The sheriff's department was the first to arrive. 2 deputies stepped out of a cruiser that had churned up the muddy drive, their expressions grim. "Mrs. Vanderbilt." The senior officer removed his hat as he entered the study where Olivia was waiting. "I'm Sergeant Miller. This is Deputy Chen. We received a missing persons report filed by your husband. I'm ready to file my own report, Olivia said, sitting by the fire with Clara sleeping in her arms. I was finally ready to tell them everything. My deposition stretched for hours. Claire recounted each detail. The drive to the Hamptons, Ethan's phone glowing. With texts, he kept angled away. The moment he insisted on a late-night sail, his exact words. She described the sudden squall, the cold water, and the desperate swim that nearly ended her. The fishermen who finally found her clinging to a buoy. She explained the financial ruin, the shell corporations, and the years of calculated deceit. She told them of his plot to switch her prenatal vitamins with something else, of appointments he'd cancel without her knowledge, of the years she blamed her own body. When she was done, the detectives looked grim. This is attempted murder, Detective Russo said flatly. Premeditated. He put you in a situation designed to kill you. And he did it after moving his assets to benefit from your death. Can you prove it? We have his phone's GPS. He was never out on the water. Cell records place him with his mistress in the city. Wire transfers reveal his planning. The detective's jaw was set. The evidence is airtight. We have a warrant for his arrest. He's been on television, calling me unstable. We saw the interviews. They're not going to play well for him, Officer Chen added. The physical evidence undermines his story. He claims he dropped you off at a spa. The boat's logs and the sedatives in your system prove he left you for dead. What happens now? Now we bring him in. He's at his mistress's family estate in Greenwich. Our Connecticut colleagues are moving in now. Detective Russo stood. I've been a cop for 23 years, Mrs. Beaumont. I've seen some terrible things, but what your husband did... He shook his head. That's a new kind of evil. You were incredibly brave to survive, and we'll make sure he faces justice for it. Ethan Beaumont was arrested that evening. Daniel broke the news to Claire, his own security team having monitored the arrest. They took him from the Museum of Modern Art's benefit dinner, he said with satisfaction. He was on stage with Isabella when the NYPD showed up. The photo of his shocked face is everywhere. He was stunned it was finally happening. What are the charges? Attempted murder, wire fraud, and reckless endangerment. The DA is considering more charges after the full toxicology report is done. Daniel gave a thin, cold smile. His father's legal army is mobilizing, but money can't make this disappear. There's too much digital evidence and public fury. For the first time since that night, Claire felt a glimmer of hope. Ethan was in custody. The evidence was overwhelming. Justice felt real. She held her baby, Noah, tighter, daring to believe the nightmare was ending. She was completely mistaken. The Beaumont family's counterattack started exactly 1 week after Ethan's arrest. Claire was recovering at Daniel's penthouse, regaining her strength and caring for her premature son. She had just put Noah down when Daniel entered, holding a courier-pouched document with a dark look. This just arrived, Daniel said, his voice clipped. From a law firm downtown. Lockwood, Sloan, and Hart? Claire took the heavy envelope, her hand trembling. She knew the name. They were the fixers New York's elite hired when they had bottomless pockets and no morals. Their lawyers made monsters vanish. She ripped open the file, her mind refusing the words. What's wrong? Jackson asked, his expression tightening with worry. Amelia, you're pale. Tell me. They want him, Amelia whispered, her voice hollow and distant. David's parents. They're filing for custody of Leo. On what grounds? They're saying I'm unstable, a danger to my own son. Her hand shook, rattling the papers. They have affidavits from doctors I've never met, and a statement from Sarah, claiming I was erratic and jealous during the entire pregnancy, she said, her voice breaking. Jackson took the file, his eyes clinically dissecting the lies, his jaw set like stone. This is manufactured, he said, his voice cold. Paid experts in perjury. This is how the wealthy write their own reality. Can they win? Can they actually take my baby? They can start a war, Jackson said, his eyes hard, but I'll be the one to finish it. Amelia saw the concern etched in his features. The Sterlings had limitless power. Their legal team warped reality for a living. The city's elite were in their pocket. And she had nothing, No job, no savings, just the kind friend who gave her refuge. It gets worse, Jackson said, his voice grim. They're moving to have David's case thrown out. They're claiming you framed him in a jealous rage over Sarah. That's insane. The data from his tablet proves their tech expert will claim it was all deep-faked. Their paid witnesses will say you were having an affair. They're painting you as a scorned woman trying to ruin him because he moved on. But it's a lie. For them, truth is irrelevant. Jackson set the documents down. What matters is the story they can sell to a judge. With their money and influence, they can make any fiction seem plausible. Amelia sank into a chair, holding Leo, who slept on, oblivious to the fight for his future that had just begun. "What do I do?" Amelia asked, her voice a thread. "I have no money to fight this." "You have me," Jackson met her gaze. "You have my resources, my network, and my legal team, who are the most ruthless in the business." His resolve was absolute. "They want a battle. We'll give them a slaughter. Why? This is too much. It will consume your life, cost a fortune. You barely know me." "Because it's the right thing to do," Jackson said, his voice softening. "Because you walked back into my life when I thought everything was transactional. Because watching you protect your son reminds me what's real." He gently brushed Leo's tiny fist. "And because this child deserves a loving mother, not grandparents who see him as a future CEO." Tears fell silently down Amelia's cheeks. "Thank you," she managed. "I can't ever repay me by winning," Jackson interrupted, standing. "I've got calls to make. The hearing is in 3 days. We need to prepare for war." The office felt cold and intimidating. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, and the hum of quiet, expensive power. An empty conference table loomed, a symbol of the coming confrontation. Amelia sat with her lawyer, Beatrice Thorne, a woman Jackson had flown in from New York. Beatrice was a legend, known for dismantling family dynasties in court. Amelia prayed the stories were true. Across the city, David Sterling's parents, Richard and Catherine, were preparing their assault. Richard, a brutal copy of his son, radiated an aura of absolute privilege. Catherine was a statue of old money, draped in designer armor. They were surrounded by a team of corporate litigators, sharks who smelled blood in the water. David himself was still detained, his family's lawyers scrambling to secure his release, and Sarah was there, playing the part of the grieving partner, her hand on her belly, a portrait of manufactured innocence that sickened Amelia. "Let's begin." Beatrice's voice cut through the tension. She projected a document onto the screen. "We have the emergency petition for custody of Leo Sterling. The petitioners, his grandparents, are seeking guardianship while criminal charges are pending against the father, David Sterling." She looked directly at Amelia. "I've reviewed their filing. It's bold. I'll give them that. They're trying to strip a newborn from his mother by alleging mental incompetence. Yet, they have no independent medical evaluation to support it. Your Honor, their lead counsel would argue, we have statements from 3 renowned specialists who, I can read, counsel, a judge would say, and I can also see that your experts are all funded by the Sterling Foundation." The lawyer's smile wouldn't fade. "Our experts are beyond reproach. Their ethics are not my concern. Their bias is." The judge would then turn to Beatrice. "Miss Thorne, your response?" Beatrice would rise, her presence commanding. "Your Honor, my client welcomes a full psychiatric evaluation by a court-appointed physician. She has nothing to fear from the truth. She is a devoted mother who survived a calculated attempt on her life, and now she is being attacked again. The petitioners claim my client is unstable. Your Honor, the petitioners are fabricating a narrative." Beatrice's voice was like ice. "And we can prove it." Her assistant distributed tablets to their team. "This is a detailed timeline of David Sterling's abuse, financial coercion, isolation, and poisoning her medication to terminate the pregnancy." "Objection!" the other side would shout. "These are baseless claims." "They are documented facts," Beatrice would counter. "We have the lab results. We have the pharmacy logs. These lab reports verify the second opinion Mrs. Hayes sought from the specialist. Your Honor, opposing counsel is attempting a character assassination. Their client is trying to take a newborn from his mother to dodge responsibility for his own conduct. Eleanor's tone was sharp as steel. To be clear, Ethan Sterling attempted to induce a miscarriage. When he failed, his family launched a smear campaign to ruin her name. They forged medical histories. They paid for fabricated expert opinions. And now they want this court to reward their deceit by giving them a perfectly healthy child who belongs with his mother. Mrs. Hayes is unemployed and has no permanent residence. Mrs. Hayes is staying with a trusted friend while she recovers from being poisoned, Eleanor shot back, turning to the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness who can speak to my client's stability and her fitness as a parent. Proceed. Call your witness. The defense calls Dr. Anya Sharma. Doctor. Sharma walked to the stand, her simple clothes and steady gaze a stark contrast to the power suits filling the room. Eleanor walked her through the final, harrowing weeks of the pregnancy, the sudden illness, the premature labor, the high-risk birth, and the baby's fight to survive. And in your medical judgment, Dr. Sharma, how did Mrs. Hayes handle this crisis? With incredible resilience, Dr. Sharma said, her voice unwavering. I've been a physician for 30 years and have watched people break under far less pressure. Amelia remained calm. She did everything we asked. She fought for her son, even as her own body was failing. Someone unstable would have collapsed. She never did. And what have you observed of her interaction with her son since he was born? She is loving, focused, and entirely competent. That child is flourishing, Dr. Sharma said, meeting the judge's eyes. He's gaining weight faster than expected for a premature baby. He's hitting every developmental marker. Her voice gained strength. He has bonded with his mother in the exact way a healthy infant should. To take him from her now would cause profound emotional harm. I would stake my medical license on that fact. The Sterling family's lawyers tried to undermine Dr. Sharma on cross-examination. They pointed out she was a family doctor, not a world-renowned obstetrician. They implied her personal connection to the case biased her view. They suggested she was being compensated for her favorable testimony. Dr. Sharma calmly parried every attack. I was the one who insisted on the toxicology screen that saved that infant's life, she stated at one point, her voice dropping to a frigid calm. I saw his mother battle through a chemical assault to deliver him safely, and you suggest I'm unqualified to assess their connection? With all due respect, counsel, my time in family practice has shown me more about human reality than your entire firm has seen from its corner offices. The Sterling legal team finished their questioning abruptly. Next, Eleanor called two more witnesses, Maya, who testified to Amelia's constant, gentle care for baby Owen, and a court-appointed therapist who had found Amelia completely stable just 2 days before. By the time Eleanor rested her case, the Sterling lawyers looked much less confident, but they had a final card to play. Your Honor, we called Jessica Croft to the stand. Amelia's stomach plummeted. She watched Jessica walk to the stand, put her hand on the Bible, and take the oath. She saw her arrange her expression into one of profound, somber regret. Miss Croft, the Sterling lawyer began, you had an intimate relationship with Ethan Sterling while he was married to the respondent. Is that correct? Yes, Jessica's voice was soft and full of shame. I'm not proud of it, but yes, it's true. And during that time, did Mrs. Hayes become aware of the affair? She did. About a year ago, she found text messages on Ethan's phone. What was her reaction? She was enraged, which I suppose is natural, Jessica said, pausing for dramatic effect. But her anger was terrifying. It was out of control. She smashed an expensive vase. She was screaming, and she threatened to kill herself and the child she was carrying. Objection! Eleanor was already on her feet. This is a malicious invention. The witness will be heard, the judge ordered. But I will remind you, Miss Croft, that lying under oath carries significant legal consequences. Jessica's composure flickered for an instant before she recovered. I was there. Ethan called me. He was panicked. He said Amelia was having a breakdown, that she swore she'd drive her car off a bridge if he left her. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I know I am no saint in this story. I know my actions were wrong, but I am truly scared for that little boy. I've seen what Amelia is capable of when she's provoked. No more questions. Eleanor rose from her chair, her face a neutral mask, but Amelia could feel the icy rage beneath it. Miss Croft, you testified that this incident occurred approximately 1 year ago. Is that correct? Yes. So, sometime in late March of last year? Yes, that sounds about right. Fascinating, Eleanor said, raising a document, because I'm holding medical records from Mrs. Hayes's fertility clinic. She was not pregnant a year ago. She didn't even conceive her son until late May. The pregnancy you allege she threatened to terminate hadn't even begun. Jessica's face went white. I must have the date wrong. It seems you're wrong about more than just the date. Eleanor's voice turned hard. Because I also have her complete prenatal file, which documents a textbook, healthy pregnancy, until the sudden poisoning in her final trimester. The same poisoning Dr. Sharma identified from the blood work. The details are a little hazy. Miss Croft, are you aware that you have just committed perjury before this court? Objection, the Sterling lawyer shouted. Counsel is harassing the witness. Counsel is revealing a lie, Eleanor retorted. Miss Croft, let me be direct. Did the event you just described ever happen, or were you coached by the Sterling family to lie under oath? Jessica's carefully constructed poise crumbled. She looked desperately toward the Sterling table, at Ethan's father's grim face, and at the lawyers who had prepared her. Her gaze then met Amelia's, the woman whose life she had helped destroy, the mother who was now clutching her baby as if her life depended on it. A brief flash of what looked like regret crossed her face. Her voice was barely a whisper. I think I need my attorney. Your Honor, I move to strike Miss Croft's testimony from the record on the grounds of perjury, Eleanor stated immediately. Motion granted, Judge Davies's voice was like ice. And Miss Croft, you will remain available for the district attorney's office regarding criminal charges. This court will not tolerate being lied to. The hearing recessed for lunch. When they returned, Judge Davies delivered her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I find no credible reason to believe the petitioner's assertion that Amelia Hayes is an unfit parent. The motion for emergency custody is consequently denied. Amelia felt a wave of relief so strong she nearly buckled. It was over. She had won. But the judge wasn't finished. However, given the gravity of the claims from both parties, I am ordering a full 90-day custody evaluation. During this time, the child will remain in Mrs. Hayes's care, but a court-appointed caseworker will perform regular home visits to ensure the child's well-being. She leveled a severe gaze at both legal teams. I will require complete cooperation from all parties. Any attempt to interfere with or manipulate this evaluation will be dealt with harshly. Am I understood? Yes, Your Honor, they answered in unison. Court was adjourned. Amelia walked out of the courthouse into the chilly afternoon. Owen was asleep in his carrier, oblivious to the battle just waged over him. Julian was there, his face tight with worry, until he saw the look in Amelia's eyes. We won for now. The words were a heavy weight on Amelia's shoulders. But it isn't over. We have 90 days of being watched. 90 more days for them to scheme up something new. And we'll be prepared for them, Julian said, taking the baby carrier from her. Come on, let's go home. Home. The word felt strange. She once believed home was that penthouse in Boston, the one Ethan now barred her from, the one that had always been a beautiful prison. But as they drove toward the peaceful coastal town, Amelia understood that home wasn't a structure. It was the sense of security she had with the people who had stood by her. They were the ones who had protected her when she was too shattered to protect herself. She had found a safe harbor in the most unexpected way after the worst night of her life. Perhaps her grandmother really had been watching over her. Maybe there was some unseen force bringing broken people together to heal each other. Or maybe it was just a lucky break in an indifferent world. Whatever the reason, Amelia was profoundly grateful. Grateful for Julian, for Eleanor, for everyone who had formed a shield around her. But as she watched the bare winter trees fly past the car window, she couldn't escape the feeling that the storm was not yet over. The Davenports had weathered the public spat, but their victory felt hollow. 2 weeks later, in their Chicago penthouse, Clara stumbled upon the thing that would shatter her fragile peace. She was in Ethan's home office, searching for a misplaced design blueprint, when her foot bumped an old leather briefcase tucked under his desk. Its contents spilled onto the antique rug. As she knelt to gather the papers, a glossy investment portfolio caught her eye. The cover read, "Regarding the trust for Theodore Vance." On it was a photo of a younger Ethan, looking so much like himself, yet with a cold, detached expression, flanked by his mother and a lawyer. He was nothing like the devoted husband she thought she knew. Claire's hands trembled as she scanned the executive summary. Ethan Davenport, then 38, was establishing a multi-million-dollar trust for the unborn son of his associate, Sophie Vance. The document noted provisions contingent on a socially discreet upbringing. It was dated just last year, long before their own pregnancy was announced. Clara heard the elevator. She quickly shoved the portfolio back into the briefcase, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Ethan had told her Sophie was just a colleague. He never mentioned a child, never mentioned a secret family trust. What other lies was he telling? Sleep offered no escape that night. Every time she drifted off, she saw that photograph, Ethan's impassive face, his mother beside him, like a queen surveying her chessboard. Had she walked blindly into a gilded cage? Had she escaped her own family's drama, only to marry into something far more insidious? The questions festered, poisoning the trust she had so carefully nurtured. The next morning, she confronted him. "I found something in your office," she said evenly. "An investment portfolio from last year, for Sophie Vance's son." Ethan went perfectly still, the color draining from his face. "Clara, you told me she was just someone you worked with. You never said you were the father of her child." Her voice cracked, a blend of fresh fury and old heartache. "What is going on, Ethan?" He collapsed into a dining chair. He was quiet for a long, heavy moment before he finally spoke, his voice thick with a regret that felt years old. "The affair was a mistake. That much is true. But the circumstances, they weren't straightforward." He took a shaky breath. "She was in a terrible position at the time. Her family had cut her off. The firm gave her an ultimatum, and she was alone. She pleaded with me to help her, to make sure her son was secure." A chilling dread seeped into Clara's bones. "Ethan, you didn't just help her. I couldn't just walk away. But I panicked. God forgive me, I hid it." His voice broke. "I spoke with my mother about setting up a trust, about ensuring the boy's future was protected, and someone, her sister, I think, tipped off a gossip columnist. The inquiry was based on a rumor that I was trying to buy her silence, that I was hiding an illegitimate heir to the Davenport fortune." Ethan met her gaze, and she saw the ruin in his eyes, a shame that had clearly never healed. Our lawyers investigated for months, interviewed her friends, reviewed her financials. And what did they confirm? That the child was mine, just as the rumors claimed. That I had done nothing but try to manage a crisis poorly, and was then painted as a villain by the very people I was trying to keep out of it. Ethan buried his face in his hands. The official story was buried. No scandal broke. But the whispers within the family never died. Board members started looking at me differently. My own father stopped trusting my judgment. He let out a hollow laugh. "That's why I became so obsessed with our image. It wasn't just ambition. It was fear. The knowledge that people I respected thought I was capable of abandoning the woman carrying my child." Clara stood there, stunned, connecting his confession to her own life. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally asked. "Because I was a coward." Ethan looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Afraid that you would see me that way too. That you'd always have that seed of doubt. That you would judge me just like my family did. I've been judging you since yesterday. I know. And you have every right to." He got up from the chair. Clara, I swear on our future, I ended things with her long ago. I love you with everything I am. I would have given anything to undo that mistake, but I couldn't. I could only try to contain the damage, and that failure has haunted me every single day. Clara thought of her first husband, of the smooth, easy lies he told because he felt nothing. Was Ethan just a more skilled performer, hiding behind a convincing mask of remorse? She looked at him, really saw the anguish in his eyes, the slight tremble in his hands, the posture of a man bracing for a final shattering blow. Her ex never looked like this. Her ex was always composed, arrogant, untouchable. He never showed weakness because, in his mind, he had none. This was different. This was real pain. I believe you, Clara said softly, but I need you to know. I spent 5 years with a man who built our life on secrets. I will not do it again. If there is anything else, I need to know it now. There's nothing else. I swear it. Then this is where we start over. Complete honesty always, she said, her eyes locked on his. Can you promise me that? Yes. Ethan's voice was raw. Yes, I promise. She gave a slow nod. The trust that had been fractured wasn't whole again. That would take time. But it hadn't been obliterated. It had been tested, and perhaps that was necessary for it to become real. All right, she said. Then we move forward. Ethan closed the distance between them and took her hands. His grip was like that of a man lost at sea, finding a piece of driftwood he thought was long gone. Thank you, he whispered, for listening, for giving me another chance. Don't make me regret it. I won't. I swear to you, I won't. They stood in the quiet morning light, two broken people trying to learn how to trust again. It was never going to be easy. But it was possible, and for now, possible felt like enough. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Sophie appeared at their building. Clara was in the nursery when the doorman buzzed, his voice laced with concern. You have a visitor, the doorman said politely. Someone I'm not sure you're expecting, but she insists it's urgent. Who is it? The doorman's pained silence told her everything. Clara's first instinct was to say no, to send Sophie away, and never lay eyes on the woman who was the source of her husband's biggest lie. But the doorman's tone made her pause. She looks very upset, he added quietly, genuinely distressed, and she's alone. Clara glanced down at the crib, the perfect, peaceful space waiting for the child she was bringing into this complicated life. Send her up, Clara said at last. But please stay on the floor. I don't trust the situation. Sophie appeared in the doorway moments later. The composed professional from company photos was gone, replaced by a bundle of nerves with dark circles under her eyes. Her pregnancy was obvious now, maybe 5 or 6 months along. Thank you for seeing me, Sophie said, her voice hoarse. I know I have no right. I know the pain I've caused. You lied by omission to protect my husband. I know. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I know, and I am deeply sorry. But that's not why I'm here. And why are you? Sophie took a shuddering breath, looking around the foyer as if she feared being recorded. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Because I think his mother is trying to get rid of me. Clara just stared. Of all the scenarios she had braced for, this was not one of them. What are you trying to say? I'm talking about the Crofts, Julian's mother, Catherine. Isabella's composure finally broke. Her voice trembled as tears welled in her eyes. After the merger failed, she blamed me. She said I was a loose end, a problem she had to solve. She held her midsection protectively. Julian called me from his office. He told me, he said, if I ever spoke against them, I'd be erased. He said it so calmly, like he was ordering lunch, as if making people disappear was just business. Julian makes empty threats to control people. He's just a bully. Maybe he is, Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible. But his mother is not. Before I came along, there was another, an intern from Northwestern. She filed a harassment complaint against him, but it all just went away. The complaint, her records, everything. She accepted a settlement to stay silent. My friend found the buried paperwork, But that's not how her story ends. Isabella's words came out in a rush. 2 months after she took that money, she was gone. Slipped on some ice on a winter night. The police ruled it a tragic accident. A chill spread through Amelia's body. Are you suggesting Julian was part of that? I can't prove it. But the Croft family has influence. Isabella shook her head. I honestly thought I was special. I actually believed Julian when he said he loved me. That you were just a complication. That we'd have a life together once you were gone. Her laugh was brittle. I was such a fool. He manipulated me just like he did her. The same way he does everyone. I'm carrying his child, and he still finds ways to intimidate me from across town, to make me feel like I am nothing. Then why are you telling me this now? Because I have something that can help you. Isabella reached into her purse and pulled out a burner phone. Encrypted messages, voice notes, bank codes, everything Julian used to cover his dealings, his plans for you, and the lengths his family will go to protect him. Amelia took the phone, her fingers trembling. Why not go to the authorities with this? I was afraid. I thought being with his family would keep me safe. Isabella's voice started to crack. But after the shareholder meeting, I understood. They were never going to protect me. I was just another line item, an asset to be managed and discarded. She met Amelia's gaze, her eyes filled with fear. I don't ask for your pity. I helped create this mess. But I am also pregnant. I'm scared for my son's future, just as you're scared for your own child. She gestured toward the phone in Amelia's hand. The leverage you need to destroy them is on there. Shadow ledgers, coded texts, with their fixers, the entire campaign to ruin your reputation. They even had contingency plans if Julian's legal issues became public. What sort of plans? Isabella hesitated, and the words she spoke next hung in the air like frost. They talked about arranging an accident before you could give your deposition. Something believable, something that could never be traced back to them. The fear in Amelia's gut turned into cold, hard anger. They were going to kill me. They want you out of the picture for good, if it comes to that. Isabella brushed away a tear. I tried to convince myself I misheard, that I was imagining things. But then Julian began making veiled threats toward me, and I knew. If they would do that to you, they'd have no problem doing it to me. Amelia stared at the burner phone. Such a small device. Such a powerful weapon. What do you want in return for this? Nothing. Isabella shook her head. I just need to get away. I have to take my son and disappear before they decide I'm too much of a liability. She paused. And I have to tell you how sorry I am for all of it. For believing Julian's lies. For helping him dismantle your life. She glanced toward the baby's room with profound shame. I told myself, you must have done something to deserve it. It was easier than admitting I was helping to ruin an innocent woman. A sob escaped her lips. I am so deeply sorry, Amelia. Amelia looked at the woman in front of her, the other woman, the one who helped her husband betray her, the liar who had tried to destroy her. She should have been filled with rage, but all she saw was another person wrecked by Julian Croft's world, another woman shattered by his charisma and his cruelty, a mother terrified for her son. The penthouse, Amelia heard herself say. It's on a private floor with its own elevator. You can stay there while we figure out how to use this. Isabella looked up shocked. You're going to help me? I'm helping your child, Amelia said, her tone resolute. That baby is as innocent as mine. He shouldn't have to answer for his father's crimes. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just give me access to everything, and let's pray it's enough to bring them down. The information on Julian's burner phone was even worse than Amelia had feared. Encrypted messages between Julian and his father about how to handle the Amelia situation. Notes to shady consultants and lawyers, all phrased with plausible deniability, but filled with malice. Financial records pointing to shell corporations with payments that corresponded to the silencing of key witnesses. But the most horrifying part was the voice memos between Julian and his mother, Catherine, outlining a final plan if the divorce became too messy. We can manage it, Catherine's calm voice said in one recording, something quiet, impossible to prove. A brake failure. A break-in that gets interrupted. There are people who handle these things. And the baby? Julian asked. The baby is a Croft. He will remain with us, naturally, regardless of his mother's unfortunate fate. Fate. Amelia played the word over in her mind. Fate. As if she were already gone. Marcus sat beside her in the office, his expression grim as they sorted through the files. This is conspiracy to commit felony assault, he said at last. A literal plot. They are discussing your death like they're closing a real estate deal. The question is, how to proceed. Amelia powered down the phone and held it in her hand. I can turn it all over to the district attorney. That's a gamble. The Crofts have connections everywhere. What if someone in the department tips them off? Marcus shook his head. We must be tactical. Back up everything. Use multiple encrypted cloud services. Create hard copies. Set up an information escrow. So if you are harmed, the entire file is released to the press. If I am harmed, a shiver went down Amelia's spine. Do you think they would actually try something? I think people do foolish things when they're cornered, and the Crofts are about to lose their empire. Marcus met her gaze. The settlement hearing is in 3 weeks. A public scandal would torpedo the Croft Tower deal. Their company would collapse. Their social standing would be ruined. Their entire dynasty is founded on an image of absolute control. For them, losing that is a fate worse than death. So they would kill to keep it. Without question. Amelia glanced at the phone. Such a small object. So much destructive potential. Then we use it, she said, not just for the hearing. For everything. We leak every lie, every crime. We let the public see who the Croft family really is. That's an enormous risk. If they discover you're going public before you act, then I just have to be quicker than they are. Amelia stood up, a new sense of purpose flowing through her. I'm finished being their pawn. I am done waiting for them to make the next move. They left me stranded in a blizzard. They tried to take my child through deceit. Now they're planning my murder to protect their name. She looked at Marcus, the one person who had stood by her. I went through hell to save my baby once. I'll do it again, but I am not going to let them win. The incident occurred 3 days before the details were scheduled to be leaked. Amelia was leaving a meeting with her legal team. Her baby was safe at the apartment with her mother. The afternoon light painted long shadows across the downtown streets. She was going over her statement, recalling the cold look in Julian's eyes when he said it was finished, the utter lack of emotion. She didn't notice the black town car that slid up beside her at the crosswalk. The initial bump was light, a typical fender bender. She moved to the side of the road, irritated, but a second vehicle immediately blocked her from behind. The town car's driver got out, his pace unhurried and confident. For a moment, nothing moved. Amelia was frozen, the quiet chime of her open door alert filling the air. Then she saw the driver from the town car approaching her. She didn't know him, but he carried an aura of detached, professional menace. Mrs. Croft, he said, his voice neutral. We need to have a word. Amelia's hand reflexively moved toward her purse. She had to call Marcus, call the police, anyone. But the man was already beside her window, holding his own phone, displaying a live photo of her mother walking her dog in the park. I would advise against that, he said smoothly. This can be very straightforward. You're going to come with me, sign a few documents, and tell us where you'll be relocating. I have no idea what you're talking about. Let's not play these little games. The woman offered a thin, condescending smile. Ethan has been funding your entire life for a year. We know he set you up with everything you need. We just need to know where you'll be raising the child. If I vanish, this whole story hits the news. Yes. The paternity proof. A desperate move. The woman nodded, almost amused. Very predictable. That's why you're not going to vanish. We're just going to have a very long, very convincing discussion about your future. Then you'll sign the non-disclosure agreement. Never. You will. Her voice turned sharp. Or we'll find other ways. Your family, for example. Such a fragile reputation. It would be a shame. The threat against her family ignited something inside Sophie. Fear turned into a cold, hard fury. "Touch my family," she said, her voice chillingly quiet, "and I will dismantle you. I will dismantle the entire Davenport dynasty. I'll burn their empire down and salt the earth it was built on." The woman chuckled. Strong words for a girl with no leverage. Strong words for someone who has nothing. She met the older woman's gaze, unblinking. I already survived losing my career, was pushed out of my job by the man who got me pregnant. Her tone was like steel. "You think I'm afraid of you? You think your money matters? I carried this child alone. I faced down your corporate lawyers with no one. I took on the whole Davenport machine in secret and won my son his security." She smiled, a brittle, sharp thing that made the matriarch hesitate. "So go ahead. See what happens when that trust document goes public. See what the world thinks when they learn the Davenports tried to intimidate the woman who could expose their perfect heir." The silence in the cafe was heavy. The matriarch's grip on her teacup was white-knuckled. Sophie's heart was pounding, but her face was a mask of resolve. Finally, the woman set her cup down. "This conversation is not over," she hissed. "No," Sophie agreed. "It's not. But when it is, you and your son will be exposed. I guarantee it." The black town car sped away, disappearing into traffic. Sophie collapsed back into her chair, trembling. With shaky hands, she called the one person who might understand. "They found me," she said when Clara answered, "at my apartment, with a contract. They wanted me to disappear. Are you safe?" "I am. Shaken. The house is a wreck, but I'm okay." She took a slow, calming breath. "Jackson, they threatened Leo. They said they'd use my son to bury me. I'm sending a security team. You're going to a secure location right now. No one will get near you. It's not enough. They won't stop." Amelia stared into the dark street. "We end this now, before they can try again." "What are you planning?" "I'm going to burn them to the ground. Give it all to the press. Every file, every recording, every piece of evidence." Her voice was pure steel. "They wanted a private war. I'm making it a public execution. Let the world see the real Sterling family. That's a massive risk. Once it's out there, we can't control the narrative. I don't want to control it. I want to destroy it." Amelia's grip on the phone was white-knuckled tight. "They used their power to silence me for years. They made me feel crazy. No more. Tonight, we give everyone the truth." There was a pause. "I'll call my contacts at the major networks," Jackson said finally. "My college roommate runs a global news wire. We can have this live in an hour. Do it. Are you sure about this? There's no coming back." Claire saw Ethan's face as he'd pushed her into the icy water. She remembered the emails of his father planning her demise. She saw the face of the man who threatened her son. "I've never been more certain." The story broke at 10 p.m. It went live everywhere. News servers crashed. Social media ignited. The headline was unavoidable. "Beaumont Empire sinks. Leaked files reveal murder for merger scheme. Decades of corruption." Claire watched from Daniel's apartment as the world learned the truth. The encrypted emails played out. Ethan discussing with his father how to neutralize Claire. Catherine suggesting a plausible accident. Ethan authorizing transfers to offshore accounts. Their lawyers planning how to discredit witnesses. Experts began weighing in. Legal analysts outlined the inevitable criminal charges. Financial experts predicted the total collapse of Beaumont properties. And woven into it all was Claire's story, which a journalist helped her write. The boat, the fall, the clinic where she almost lost her life, the birth of her son, the custody battle, the threats, the break-in. She revealed everything, every fact, every emotion, every moment of terror and resolve. And the public listened. By morning, #JusticeForClaire was trending globally. By noon, protesters were outside Beaumont Tower. By evening, their stock had lost 40% of its value. Ethan Beaumont released a statement calling it a smear campaign. It was debunked within minutes. Catherine Beaumont was taken in for questioning by federal agents. Her lawyers failed to stop it. And Ethan, in his cell, was put on suicide watch after a violent breakdown, screaming he'd never see a courtroom. But Claire's battle was far from won. The night before she was to testify, Claire paced the safe house. Noah was asleep, the city a distant hum. Tomorrow, she would see Ethan again. She'd face the grand jury at dawn, hoping her story would be enough. Evan found her by the window at 3 a.m. gazing at the San Francisco Bay. "You can't sleep either," he murmured. "When I shut my eyes, all I see is his smile. The look he gave me before he locked me in the lab. Like I was disposable." Claire wrapped her arms around herself. "What if they don't believe me? What if this server data isn't enough? What if he gets acquitted and finds Owen?" Evan moved to her side, covering her hands with his. "Remember what you said when I was worried about breaking that encryption? That uncovering the truth requires taking a risk? Yes, this is it. Tomorrow, the facts go on trial. Your testimony against their lies, your data against their influence, your resilience against his fury." He squeezed her hands. "You aren't the woman he controlled. You aren't the scientist who believed his lies for years. You're someone new, someone tougher, someone who survived his worst." "I don't feel tough. I feel terrified." "The two go hand in hand," Evan said, smiling faintly. "The bravest people I've ever met were always scared. They just didn't let fear dictate their actions." Claire leaned her head on his shoulder, absorbing his strength, his belief in her. "You'll be there? In the courtroom? For the entire thing? I'll be right behind you. I promise, I promise." They watched the sky lighten over the bay. Then Claire straightened her back, squared her shoulders, and prepared for the most important day of her life. The proceedings began on a brisk Tuesday, fog clinging to the courthouse windows. Claire took the stand at 10:15. She was in a simple navy dress, her hair tied back. Owen was safe with Evan's sister and a security guard he'd hired. The prosecutor, Maya Singh, guided her through the sequence of events. Finding the hidden server partition, Daniel's erratic behavior, the engineered lab fire, her escape through the service tunnels. Claire recounted her experience with clarity, letting the evidence paint the picture. She wanted the jury to hear the truth in her voice and see it in her eyes. "And what happened when you reached Mr. Hayes's apartment?" Maya asked. "I collapsed on his doorstep. The rest is a blur. Evan found me and got me out. The paramedics arrived. They saved us. And your son?" "Owen was born that night. Premature but strong. A fighter. The paramedics called him a fighter." "Objection!" Daniel's attorney barked, leaping to his feet. "Describing the infant's condition is inflammatory." "Overruled," the judge stated flatly. "Given the context of the testimony, the court finds the term fitting." Miss Singh proceeded. "Miss Vance, after your son was born, did you experience further intimidation?" "Yes." Claire met the juror's eyes. "Daniel's family launched a baseless custody claim to take my son using forged medical records. When that failed, they paid a man to break into our safe house. He threatened to hurt my baby unless I gave him the credentials to the server that proves their crimes." "Objection, that is unsubstantiated." "It is fully substantiated." Miss Albright held up a tablet. "We have forensic audits, signed confessions, and wire transfers from a shell company linked to the attack on Miss Vance's character. The private investigator has been tied to the Thorne family's corporate security firm for years." The defense attorney slumped in his seat, looking defeated. "Miss Vance," Miss Albright continued, "why did you leak the preliminary trial data to a medical journal instead of only providing it to the authorities?" Claire was ready for this question. "Because I was afraid," she said simply. "The Thorne family has connections in every field. Their money buys silence. Their influence is pervasive. I had already seen them falsify research and bribe inspectors. I heard them threaten me and my unborn son. I listened as they planned to destroy my reputation as if it were a routine business expense." She looked at each member of the jury. "I leaked that data because I needed the world to see the truth before they could bury it. I needed thousands of witnesses who couldn't be bought off or intimidated." Her voice became steel, "and I wanted Daniel and his parents to understand that I am not afraid anymore. They cannot delete me. The truth is worth more than their stock portfolio and their power combined." The courtroom was silent. Even the defense attorneys were stunned. Miss Albright gave a small nod and returned to her seat. No further questions. Daniel's lead counsel stood for the cross-examination. He looked like a man fighting a losing war, but still had to justify his fee. Miss Vance, isn't it true? You and your husband had a difficult marriage. Our marriage was difficult because he was a controlling narcissist. Claire's voice was steady. He isolated me from my friends and my career. He monitored every purchase. He secretly replaced my thyroid medication, making me think I was losing my mind. And when he found a new woman, he tried to have me killed. That is your interpretation. No, that is the truth. Claire held his gaze, steady. Your client is on trial because the evidence is irrefutable. Encrypted lab results, falsified reports, shell company ledgers, recorded conversations. Present whatever narrative you want, counselor, but the data does not lie. Daniel Thorne tried to erase me, and he would have succeeded if I hadn't made it to Evan Hayes' home. The lawyer attempted other angles. He implied she was unstable. He suggested the data was fabricated. He argued the recordings were manipulated. Claire calmly dismantled every claim with the poise of someone who had already faced her worst fears. Finally, he gave up. No more questions. Claire stepped down from the witness stand. She walked past Daniel without looking at him, past his parents, who sat pale and rigid, past the reporters. She left the courtroom with her head held high. She did not look back. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Claire was at the safe house when Maya called. She was in the nursery, humming to Owen, when her phone buzzed with the verdict. Guilty on all charges, Maya said, her voice trembling with relief. Securities fraud, attempted murder, reckless endangerment, conspiracy, every last one. Claire closed her eyes, absorbing the words. Guilty. After all the terror and manipulation, the truth had prevailed. What about his parents? Their indictments are next, but the prosecutor is confident. His father is facing fraud and conspiracy charges. His mother is looking at accessory charges from those recordings. The entire Thorne empire is collapsing, Claire. The whole thing. And Daniel's sentence? It's in 3 weeks, but the prosecution is recommending 30 years to life. With the evidence of extreme malice and the conspiracy, Maya paused. He's not getting out. He will die in prison. Claire looked down at Owen, sleeping in her arms, so small, so new, so oblivious to the storm he was born into. It's over, Claire whispered. Yeah. Maya's voice grew soft. It's finally over. You won, Claire. You defeated them. After she hung up, Claire sat in the quiet room, watching her son breathe, feeling something she thought she had lost forever. Peace. Evan found her there a while later. He leaned against the doorframe, not wanting to disturb the moment, but she saw him and smiled, beckoning him in. I saw the press conference, Liam said quietly. It's everywhere. I know. How are you holding up? Eleanor considered the question. After being dragged through a public spectacle, how did she feel? Empty, she finally admitted. Like I've been holding up a skyscraper for 6 years. And it just collapsed. Liam sat beside her, his gaze soft as he watched Sophie sleep. What's your next move? He asked. I rebuild, she said, leaning on him. First, I get my curator credentials reinstated, then find a new place. I'll raise my daughter and become who I was before Marcus Thorne made me his wife. You could stay here, Liam offered. This brownstone is huge. There's plenty of room, and Sophie has everything she needs. Liam? Eleanor smiled, touching his arm. Are you asking me to move in? He looked away, a rare flash of unease. I'm asking you not to leave, not yet. His voice was low. These past few months, watching you navigate this storm, seeing your resilience, it's changed me. Clara would have been in awe of you. It's a strange thought, but it crosses my mind all the time. She would see what I see. Someone exceptional, someone worth fighting for. Liam, I can't even think about that. I know what you've been through. You need space. But I want you to know, I'm here. This house is here. We're your family, if you want us to be. Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't sorrow, but gratitude, and a spark of hope. I'm not ready for that, she whispered. I don't know if I can ever let someone in like that again. I understand, but I'm not ready to leave either. She looked around the sun-drenched living room, the safe harbor she'd found with this man. This feels safe. You feel safe. For now, maybe that's all that matters. I can live with that, Liam said, a genuine smile finally reaching his eyes. Good. Eleanor kissed his cheek. Now go save your ferns. You've probably drowned them all waiting for the verdict. Liam chuckled as he stood. At the door, he paused. Clara would have admired you, I'm certain. I wish I could have met her. I think you have, in a way. He looked at the room, at the baby, at the woman who had walked through fire and refused to be burned. I think she's been watching over this house, waiting for it to feel like a home again. He left her in the quiet afternoon light. 3 months after Marcus's public downfall, Isabel gave birth to a boy she named Matteo. She considered a name with no connection to the Thorn Empire, but chose one meaning gift of God. She wanted a life for him, far from the poison that had ruined his father. Eleanor met her at a quiet cafe a day later, her feelings a tangled mess of pity and residual anger for the woman who was her rival. He's beautiful, Eleanor said, looking at the sleeping child. He has your eyes. Isabel's voice was hollow. I just hope that's all he inherited from him. Our children aren't their parents. Sophie isn't Marcus, and Matteo won't be either, not with you as his mother. Isabel looked at Eleanor, stunned. How can you be this gracious after everything I did? Because you were his victim, too. He played us against each other with a script he'd perfected. My wake-up call was a leaked photo on a gossip blog. Yours was a federal indictment. I should have known. Maybe. But you came forward. Your information was the key. You testified against his board last month. You helped make sure his shadow can never touch anyone else. Isabel offered a tight, weary smile. That took guts, Eleanor. Real guts. It feels like the bare minimum. Then let's call it a start. They sat in the quiet cafe, 2 women bound by the same man's deceit, now on separate journeys. The Boston sunlight streamed through their windows. Outside, the city moved on. I'm moving to Austin next week, Isabel said. My cousin owns a small firm there. I can start over. Oh, that sounds like a good plan. Will you? Isabel hesitated. Tell Sophie about Matteo someday. They are brother and sister. Eleanor considered it. 2 children, blameless in their father's betrayals, deserving of peace. When they're old enough to process it, she finally said, when they can decide for themselves what that bond means. Yes, I'll tell Sophie she has a brother. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. Thank you for everything, for not completely destroying me when you had every reason to. That's just basic decency. But I wasn't decent. I was the other woman. You were never the enemy, Isabel. You were just another one of Marcus Thorne's acquisitions. Eleanor reached out, her fingers briefly touching Isabel's hand. We're not friends, but we are linked by our children and our survival. That has to count for something. Isabel nodded, speechless. Eleanor stood. Take care of yourself, Isabel, and give Matteo a childhood filled with the honesty and love that Marcus denied both our babies. I will, I promise. Eleanor walked back into the bright afternoon. The world kept spinning after her life imploded. She found Liam in his study, sketching on a tablet. He looked up, his smile a familiar comfort. How did it go? She's okay. Scared, but okay. Eleanor dropped into a nearby chair. She's leaving for Texas. A fresh start. Probably for the best. I agree. Eleanor paused. She asked if I'd ever tell Sophie about her son. And what did you say? I said I would. Those kids didn't choose their father or his sins. Liam nodded. Clara would have said the same thing. You're always comparing me to her. Only in the best ways, he smiled. You're very different. She was organized joy. You're something else entirely. Forged in betrayal, and stronger than you know. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, and yes, a very good one. Liam came around the desk and knelt in front of her, taking her hands. I loved Clara completely. When she died, I thought that part of my life was over for good. I thought I would just exist in this house with her memory. But now I find myself hoping she was right about what comes next. Not because I want to get there, but because I want her to see this. His voice grew thick. I want her to see that I found a reason to live again, that her house became a home again. Liam, I'm not asking for anything, he said, his grip tightening. I know you need to heal, but I need you to know how I feel. When I look at you, I don't see a victim. I see an incredible woman who saved herself, and I am grateful every day that you landed on my doorstep during that storm. Eleanor felt the familiar sting of tears, a mix of relief, fear, and fragile hope. I'm terrified, she whispered. Terrified to trust anyone. Terrified I'll be wrong again. I know. She took a shaky breath. But I'm so tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting Marcus haunt my life. I want to build something new, Liam. I don't know how. Then we'll learn how. Together. Liam squeezed her hands. No pressure. Just two people who found shelter and decided to walk into the sun together. Claire laughed, tears in her eyes. That was almost poetic. I've been getting some coaching, he confessed with a smile. My son thinks I need to be more romantic if I'm going to win you over. He has very strong opinions about it. Owen wants us to be a couple. Owen has wanted us to be a couple since 48 hours after we moved in. He's been leaving hints that are as obvious as a billboard. I think his text yesterday was, Dad, please just ask her to dinner. This is painful to watch. Claire's laugh was fuller this time, a sound finally released from the fear that had caged it for so long. Well, she said, smiling, I suppose we shouldn't let Owen suffer anymore. Absolutely not. The kid would never let me hear the end of it. She closed the small distance between them and kissed him. It was soft at first, a question. It deepened into an answer as he kissed her back. When they broke apart, they were both grinning. So what happens now? Evan asked. Now. We do what you promised. We figure it out. Together. Claire stood, taking his hand. But first, I think your sister mentioned lasagna is ready, and I'm suddenly ravenous. Always practical. One of us has to be. They went to the kitchen, holding hands. Outside the window, the lights of San Francisco began to sparkle in the twilight. The apartment felt like a home again. It was filled with light, warmth, and the sound of Owen gurgling on the baby monitor. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Life rarely offered those. But it was a new beginning, a genuine one, forged in truth and the harsh wisdom gained from surviving the unimaginable. And for Claire Vance, that was better than anything she could have imagined. The rooftop gathering was Evan's idea. 1 year to the day since Claire had escaped her Nob Hill penthouse and appeared on his doorstep. 1 year since their worlds had collided and changed forever. It was a milestone that deserved to be marked. The terrace of his firm had never looked more beautiful. Elegant floral arrangements stood against a panorama of steel and glass. Linen-draped tables were scattered across the space, overlooking the city. Strings of lights were woven overhead, casting a soft glow as the sun went down. Claire stood by the railing, observing her new reality. Maya, her lawyer, was chatting with one of Evan's partners, no doubt planning a new fund for whistleblowers in the tech industry. Dr. Sharma, her therapist, was laughing with a few friends. Evan's son had brought some of his college friends. Their youthful energy, a sharp contrast to the silent battles of the previous year. Maya toddled across the rooftop garden, her purpose clear. At 14 months, she was a force of nature, Eleanor recognized as her own. Mama, Maya said, wrapping her arms around Eleanor's leg. Stars, soon, my love. We're waiting for everyone. Stars now. Eleanor laughed, scooping her up. You are definitely my daughter. She is definitely someone's daughter. Liam joined them with 2 glasses of sparkling water. A will that powerful must be inherited. Are you saying I'm stubborn? I'm saying you're determined. It's one of the best things about you. He kissed her, handing her a glass. To 1 year. To 1 year. Eleanor clinked her glass against his. And to many more. They had been officially a couple for 6 months, building something real from the ruins of their pasts. It wasn't easy. For Eleanor, trust was still a fragile thing. But they were navigating it, one day at a time. The small, constant acts of kindness, were creating something stronger than either had ever known. A friend appeared, beaming with pride, at the party she'd helped plan. The first course is plated, Ben's sister murmured. Maybe it's a good moment for a toast? A toast? Clara's stomach did a nervous flip. I don't have anything prepared. You don't need a script. Just speak from the heart, she said, taking a fussy Theo from Clara's arms. I've got the little guy. Go on. Before Clara could protest, Ben was leading her to the front of his bustling new restaurant. The lively chatter died down as all eyes turned to her, full of warmth. She scanned the faces of her newfound family, then thought of the sterile glass tower overlooking Puget Sound, where her old life had shattered. Taking a deep breath, she began, Just over a year ago, my world fell apart. The room went silent. I was sitting on the floor of a walk-in closet, staring at a credit card statement. It wasn't the designer clothes or fancy dinners that broke me. It was the rent payments for a downtown penthouse I'd never seen. The man I'd built a life with was funding a double life. She looked across the room and found Ben's steady gaze. I had nothing, and then a man I barely knew from the farmer's market saw me crying in my car and offered me a simple kindness. When my son was born, 2 days later, he entered a world where people had already decided he was one of their own. Clara's voice grew stronger. This past year has redefined everything for me. I discovered that family isn't about blood ties, but about who shows up. I learned that resilience isn't about being unbreakable, but about refusing to stay broken. And I now know that your lowest point can be the foundation for something real, if you're brave enough to build it. Her eyes met Ben's, who stood by the kitchen door, his own eyes shining. I also realized that true love isn't a storybook romance. It's not flawless. It's complicated and frightening, and you risk getting burned. But it's what gives you a night like this, surrounded by people who chose you, holding a future you never thought you'd have. A life that felt impossible just 12 months ago. She raised her glass. So here's to farmers' markets, to strangers who become your sanctuary, to babies who anchor you to what's true, and to all of you who helped me find my way out of a gilded cage and into the warmest kitchen I've ever known. Cheers. The word was echoed by a chorus of clinking glasses. Clara stepped down and walked right into Ben's arms. That was beautiful, he murmured against her hair. It was all true. I know, he said, stepping back. I have something for you. I couldn't hold on to it any longer. He reached into his chef's coat and pulled out a small, velvet-covered box. Clara's breath caught. Now hold on. Don't get ahead of yourself, Ben said gently. It's not what you think. He opened the box. Inside, nestled on the velvet, was not a ring, but a small, sterling silver whisk charm on a simple chain. It was my mom's, he said quietly. She was a baker. Wore this every day for good luck. After she died, I put it away. It was too hard to look at. He gently took Clara's hand. I'm not asking for forever yet. I know that's a loaded word, but I want you to have this, to carry a piece of her with you, to be a part of our family's story, wherever we go from here. Clara looked at the tiny whisk, a token of a past love and a symbol of a new one taking root. It connected the woman he'd lost, the woman she used to be, and the man who was healing them both. Are you certain? She whispered. It's so special. My dad insisted, Ben said, his smile soft. He said Mom would have adored you. He also threatened to fire me from my own kitchen and hire you instead if I messed this up. Clara laughed, a tear finally escaping. In that case, yes. Of course. Ben carefully fastened the chain around her neck. The little silver charm felt cool against her skin, like it belonged there. I love you, Clara said, the words simple and true. I love you, Ben. Her voice was steady. I love your son, your incredible parents, and this loud, wonderful kitchen. I love the life we are creating from scratch. I love you too, he replied, giving her a gentle kiss. You reminded me how love is supposed to feel. I'm grateful for you every single day. They stood together in the heart of the restaurant, surrounded by the family they had built, the evening glowing with promise. Her son's happy gurgle came from a nearby table, where Ben's father was making him laugh. And Clara, who had discovered a devastating betrayal in a cold, minimalist mansion and rebuilt her life from the ruins, finally knew with absolute certainty that she was home.